Barbara, welcome to the Shift Podcast.
Thank you so much, Elena. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
It's a long time coming. We've chatted, I think, over the last few months, and we've been trying to make it happen. I'm happy it happened. I'm sad I missed you in Bali, but I will catch you next time. I know we wanted to do something in person and on a podcast, so definitely I think it's something I want to do next time. It didn't work out this time, but I would have loved to do this in person because I feel like everything's just better in person. But I think the next best thing is just to do this now, and it's where it's meant to be. So I'm really, really excited to chat with you and talk about some of the work that you're doing. Before we go into the depth of that, tell my audience a little bit more about your story, particularly your career story. You have a pretty interesting life, and you've kind of just global citizen. So I'm just curious, tell me a little bit more about how you got to where you are today.
Thank you so much for that. So I identify with two titles at the moment. I am a medical anthropologist, and I'm also a conscious leadership, well-being, and neuroscience-based coach. And the story around that is, so I'm going to use my academic qualifications as the journey, because all my qualifications were related to trying to understand myself as a human being. And then from that perspective, it's the information that I use to coach other people and help them along their pathway. So my first degree was psychology. And the reason why I took psychology was because I really wanted to understand what was happening in my world. So my biological parents died when I was very young. And that, as you can imagine, is confusing for any person, let alone a child. And I had to grow up very quickly. Now, during the time I was growing up, the adults around me would say one thing and do something else. And the way that they loved me was so different from the way that I understood viscerally inside of myself, though I did not have the words at that stage, to what love really felt like for me in my soul. I've got the words now, like speak about soul and spirit and all of those things. But as a child, you don't know. There's like a disconnect to say, I know these people are trying to look after me, but the way they're doing it is not feeling good. And yet I can't say anything. So in my culture, children are meant to be seen but not heard. So you can't sort of, ask questions when I was growing up at least. And it was so very confusing for me because I'm a very curious person. So psychology seemed to have the answers by the time that I got to my first university experience, because it got me to understand behavior, the way that people think, and the way that they also learn. So when people treat us in a way that's not conducive to how we want to be treated, it's not because they are bad people, it's because that's what they know. And unless or until we ourselves understand ourselves enough, we are unable to vocalize or to show by example how we actually want to be treated on the outside. So psychology gave me sort of a footing into understanding human behavior. Now, over the years, I was absorbed into a white family, and they've been my second family for more than 2 decades now. So my mom is American and dad is British. And so already before I moved into the family, there were already two different cultures.
Yeah.
So that
How old
also
were you then? How old were you when your parents died, and how old were you? And this was in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my dad died when I was, I think, 5 or 6. And then my mother remarried 9 years later and had my younger brother. But that marriage did not work out because there were family disputes. My mother passed on when I was 16 and my brother was 7. She died from HIV/AIDS in a time where there was a lot of stigma. There was little access to ARVs. It was a really difficult time, and I had to look after her throughout until the day before she died. So that was traumatic in its own ways. And it's actually one of the reasons that I started working in the HIV/AIDS world and doing psychosocial support, especially for young people. And I'll speak or share more about that as we go along. So moving into this family, I knew my current mother at 11 because she was good friends with my biological mother. So that's how I got introduced to her. And then my mother died at 16, and that's when our relationship strengthened with my current mother. And so I moved in with them probably not straight away after my mother's death. There was a big gap in between where I had to sort of grow up, figure out things, finish my A levels, the last 2 years of my high school, find a job, get my younger brother into school, find a maid, and start being an adult as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was living through it, there was no time to reflect because I had to just get on and make a living to look after myself and my younger brother. My relatives from my mother's side, unfortunately, did not have the resources and the ability to take care of us. So everything did fall on me. And as I was going through that, because I try and reflect, when I was going through that, I don't think I realized how traumatic the experience was because I just had to get on and live. And also, one of the things I'd love to thank my biological mother before she died, she literally prepared me for her death. I don't remember the conversations she said, but they stuck. Because as soon as I heard that she passed away, I sort of stepped up. I literally prepared the home for a funeral. And I was just ready to get things started. And I can never tell you the exact conversations I had with her or what she said to me because I wasn't consciously absorbing the advice and the direction she was giving me as a teenager, but it did stick with me. And that said a lot around just how much our brain and our minds absorb without us even realizing. So that was really great in terms of preparing me to walk on this adult journey at a young age. So when I was in my second family, it was confusing for both ends or both sides because neither of us had lived in the same household with someone from a completely different culture, understanding, upbringing, language, even. So, as much as all my education since I was 5 or 6 has always been in English, English is my second language. My first language is called Shona, which is one of the main languages in Zimbabwe. So, any language speaks of culture. And so bringing that into this environment was confusing. And what led me to start the journey of understanding that was going back to school and understanding anthropology and studying anthropology. So I've got an honors in social cultural anthropology to really understand on the outside, we all look different, which is amazing. But in the inside, we're interconnected. We all want to be loved. We all want a sense of belonging. We all want to give back. We all want to earn. It's really the same underneath our skin. And for me, that was intriguing. It was also very much inspiring because I didn't feel like I was an outsider as much anymore, but I was part of the network of the world. So not so much my family alone. Feel free to stop me at any stage. I just
No,
love sharing
please.
my story.
Yeah, I love it. Keep going.
And one of the other things I then did after my social cultural anthropology degree was do my master's in medical anthropology. Now, the reason why this component is so important or was so important for me is during the time that my mother was sick, she had what is called Kaposi sarcoma, which is cancer where your skin, when you get a scab, it doesn't heal, it keeps eating away at the skin. I'm not using proper medical terms, but that's layman's language. And so she was always in pain. She was hospitalized. And she was hospitalized whilst I was doing one of my main high school exams. And I remember going to the hospital after each exam to see her. And I could see the shame that she had on her face of just being in hospital, not being there for me. Though she couldn't help it, I didn't blame her or anything. But I think that was just coming from a nurturing mother perspective. I felt the guilt as well. As children, we absorb a lot of emotions from the adults around us. We might not understand it, but our body absorbs it in different ways to try and understand so we can fit into our different environments. And because we're social beings, that information is really about how do I help the people around me? How do I help myself? How do I make sure that I'm relevant in other people's lives and myself? And as an adult, as a child, I felt that. But obviously, I didn't have the words that I have now.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother was hospitalized. She did not have access to ARVs. She then went into palliative care. And in this space, this palliative care house, it was run by nuns. It was run through very limited funding. So they also did not have enough staff. We did not have ARVs again. My mother was literally
And
living on
ARVs is
morphine.
like the medicine, right? Or what is like
Yes, for
okay.
HIV. Yes, yes.
And then define also quickly the medical anthropology for me.
Mm.
What does that mean? And then yeah.
So yeah, so anthropology is study of people and culture, what influences us according to how we've been raised and the values and culture. And then the medical part is what are the decisions that we make when it comes to our health.
Okay.
So it could be a physical health, it could be your mental health, anything that's got to do with your well-being. What influences those decisions, and what are the systems in place that help us or enhance that influence, or maybe reduce the prospect of reaching out for services or support from the people around us. So it's to do with culture still, but it's more focused on the medicine part or the medical part.
Mm-hmm.
And the interest for me was because I'd gone up looking after my mom when she died. Because when she moved into this place, this palliative care home, I was the one who was tasked to look after her because they didn't have enough funding for enough staff. So
Gotcha.
anyone who was sick had to bring someone from home to look after
Okay.
their relative. So that was me. And all of this was happening between the ages of 16, 17. My mother died 1997, and I've only now, and this links to the reason why I came to Bali, only now really deeply grieved my mother in 2024, and she died in 1997 because I just had to get on and live. And so my body was holding on to this stuff, and I had no idea what was happening. And I really wanted to understand it. And it's one of the reasons I came to Bali, because Bali has so many modalities of healing, and it's a very open, inviting, lovely space. And the community is founded on family values. And traditionally in Zimbabwe and in Africa in general, family is a huge, big thing. It's our foundation. And so I really related to that. And so I just needed to come, and I've been in Bali for 2 years, and it's been amazing. And I'd promised myself I'll be here for 2 years, then see what comes after that. Now, later on, after my medical anthropology degree, which I did up north in Durham University in the UK, I was really curious about the mind, because I really wanted to dig down into, okay, I've got all this knowledge about culture, about how people live, about how people, understand their world and how they use that to move through their professions or their personal lives. But how can we use our minds and brains for higher performance? Because the brain is literally in our own heads individually, and our minds are, and I'll try and define the mind. So the things that we think regularly make up what is called the mind. So the mind is an accumulation or a tapestry of the things that we expose ourselves to, the things that we watch, the things that we see, the words that we take from the environments that we're in, and that comes into our system, and that becomes the mind. So our personalities are a result of the words, the thoughts, the sentences that we speak and expose ourselves to every single time, because everything has been knitted through exposure on every platform. So my wanting to understand this was, I really would like to harness the power I already have. How do I do that? And that led me to studying neuroscience-based coaching, because it really helps us unpack what the mind is. It really gets us to understand that we've got neural pathways in our mind, in our head, in our brain. And the more we think in a certain way, the more we become that. Because when we, for example, think positive thoughts, and we engage in positive things that are high vibration, our brain literally takes that and produces hormones and chemicals that allow us to be calm and happy and joyful. And that becomes stuff that is knitted into our personality and our reality. If when I was growing up, because of all the trauma that my body had absorbed, I was always thinking negatively, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, just always anxious because I never knew what was going on, what the world would bring to my table that I didn't ask for. And so I got really depressed, and that became my personality.
Would you
Was
say,
always sad.
yeah, can I jump in here just to ask,
Hmm.
would you say that some of those feelings are they like symptoms of trauma? Like how would, if somebody's listening and be like, well, I feel sad or I feel, I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, do you think that's a presence of some kind of trauma? Or like, how do you recognize if it's trauma or if it is just like, I don't know, a bad week or you're just going through something or anxiety? Like, is there a way to like differentiate trauma versus something else?
I don't know if there's a definite way to differentiate. An empowering thing that has helped me now. So I'll answer the question from the point of the unhealed version of myself, and then from the point of view of the healed version. So from the unhealed version, I was deeply sad, deeply depressed. And even then, I did not know what was going on. I did not know the words because everyone around me seemed to be happy, but there was just something happening inside of me that was not okay. And it was because I was so afraid of what was going to happen because my parents had died without me even knowing what death was and understanding that. And so I was always on edge. And that for me represented trauma. My body was just waiting to say, okay, what's next that I can't control? And in that perspective, when you look at it from the brain, my amygdala was hyper connected to everything. And so I was always spewing out stress hormones, your cortisol, because I was always on edge, always anxious, always afraid of what was going to happen. Now, I still feel sad, even now in the healed space. But instead of feeling like I'm not in control, I ask myself, what got me here? What happened that's making me sad? What am I feeling sad about? And I sit with that. And I just allow my body to be okay in that space as opposed to trying to fight it. Because trying to fight it in my old unhealed version was saying words to myself like, what are you doing? Get on and do some work. This is not okay. You know that the world does not revolve around you. It was just not good words, which made it even worse because it was almost like I was re-traumatizing myself using negative language, pointing at myself in a negative way, judging myself harshly, feeling that there was something wrong with me because I couldn't solve this. And that was a lot. And so it was almost like just a cycle of self-abuse because I did not have the tools. And I did not have the language to really understand that emotions come and go. And now in my healed space, it's more like, okay, I'm feeling sad today. I wonder what's happening. If someone else was feeling sad, how would I support them? What would I ask them? Let me do the same thing to myself. Let me be my own best friend. There's a Buddhist term called Maitri. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it the right way, but it's spelled Maitri, and it speaks about being your own best friend. I'm just paraphrasing here. And so if someone else, a friend, were to come and say, Barbara, I'm feeling really sad, how would I help them? I would say, what do you need right now? What can I support you with? Do you want me to give you a hug? Do you want me to cook something for you? What do you need? And so that's what I do for myself. And sometimes it's just like, okay, I just need to take a nap. Or I feel like I need some pumpkin soup. Or maybe I need a cup of tea. Or maybe let me do some journaling. So it's really about being deeply compassionate with ourselves. And sometimes in that space, there's an opening in our mind that allows us to understand why we feel sad. Maybe it's related to something that's happened in the past. So, because we've taken time to really sit down and be compassionate with ourselves, we're able to bring that up in our subconscious, sometimes without even realizing it. That is connected to what had happened in the past that we can now focus on. So, the sadness is just a trigger to just say, oh, there's something happening here. Right now, what I need is this. And maybe with time, I'll figure out what got me to get to this stage. the relaxing part of doing the journaling, of being compassionate with yourself, what it's doing, it's also related to your brain. You're relaxing, which means you're releasing dopamine, which is a calming hormone that allows you to be in a better space where you're not spiraling out of control into the fear part of your brain. And so you're literally self being self-compassionate, you're self-caring for yourself is the ultimate mode of self-love,
Mm-hmm.
by doing all these loving activities. So that's what helped me really want to understand how I could help myself,
Mm-hmm.
because I was tired of feeling negative and it felt like the world was just passing by. Everyone else seemed happy and I did not want to live like this anymore. It was just, I don't want to do it. You get to a stage where your body also gets tired and it nudges you in different ways to just say, we don't want to do this. We know there's a different way of living. And I know this because we have an inner voice within ourselves, and we call it different things depending on religion. Sometimes it could be the God in you, it could be the universe, um, it could be the Buddha in you, whatever it is, depending on your religion. But we all have this part inside of us, our higher inner voice, that we know that when things are not happening okay on the outside, it's always loud enough. The knowing that you know something is not okay is that voice that is telling you, something is not okay. What can I do to either change the situation? If I can't change the situation, to get myself out of that situation, whether it's an environment or whether it's a relationship that does not serve either parties anymore, whatever it is, what that voice is really important. That knowing is really important, and each and every one of us has it. And each and every one of us has a life purpose. And our life purpose, even though we might not know what it is and we can't say it in words, that knowing is what will lead you to your life purpose. So, one of the things that I do when I'm coaching is people, when they ask me, let's say in a rush, to say, well, I really want to understand what my life purpose is. And so I can start living it. I asked them two questions, or I asked them to reflect on two questions. The first thing is, what are the things that really bring you joy in your life? What are the things that allow you to be calm and happy and on top of your game and in flow? Write those down. The second thing is, what are you curious about in life, in all areas of life? It doesn't have to do anything to do with your profession or your family. Just what are you curious about as an individual? And write those things down. Now, the reason why those two questions are important is that when you do the things that bring you joy more often than not, you're releasing the happy hormones in your brain that allows you to calm down and be able to actually listen into that knowing that will guide you to where you need to be and or remove you from the places that don't serve you anymore. That's one thing. When you follow the things that you're curious about, those things are also the knowing that saying, hey, there might be something here. Why don't you go and do some more research? Because that's tugging at your soul strings or your heartstrings.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do the things that bring you joy more often than not, and you follow the things that you're curious about, that will lead you to your life purpose. And I'm a living example of this because of my career trajectory. I was curious about why people would say they love me, but they treated me differently on the outside as a growing child and as an adult. So I really wanted to understand psychology, and I was
What can I
privileged
ask?
enough.
Can I ask you what
Mm.
do you mean by, you said it a couple times, but what do you mean by that? Like, what does that look like? Somebody saying one thing but then doing another. Do you have an example
Yes.
from your life?
Yes. So I was emotionally abused. I was physically abused. I was sexually abused, all by family members and close family friends. And as a child, I did not have a voice. I did not understand what was going on, but I knew that this was not okay. And the adults around me I did not feel psychologically safe around them to be able to share every single thing that I wanted to share. And in fact, it made it difficult because those same adults were in the same social circles as the people who had treated me not so well. And yet, those people would utter the words, "We love you." And in myself, it was like, no, I know I'm 5, but something is not okay here and does not feel right. But who do I tell? So even when my biological mother died, she did not know that I went through all of these things because my body also shut down. A lot of these things, I only remembered them when I started the journey of questioning and being curious about what was happening around me. And also, it wasn't just abuse on myself, but abuse on other people around me would start telling me stories around what happened in their childhood. And then I started connecting the dots and became curious to say, well, this is not okay. Why are we still going through all of these things as a society as a whole? And, when I was studying psychology as well, I studied around just a lot of things that we say are cultural things, but are actually damaging to us. And I don't want to go into detail in that because I know that culture is made of values, and I'm not coming from a space of judging. I'm just coming from a space of this did not feel okay for me. It did not feel okay for the people who are going through that. It is not feeling okay for the people who are being abused right now. So surely, where's the disconnect? Why are we not having these conversations outright? Why are we not asking more? What is going on? I want to be of service to other people and give them the tools and resources to be able to ask those questions for themselves, because each and every individual in this entire world has a purpose, which is deeply connected to their knowing. And the more that we go on this journey of being really curious about who we are as individuals, the more we can positively contribute and live a meaningful life for ourselves and the people around us, especially if we're leaders, because we're influencing so many people around the world. And when I look at myself from the unhealed space, as much as I contributed in the ways that I could at that stage, it was not from a space that was compassionate to myself and the people around me. And now that I'm contributing from a more compassionate space, I'm able to communicate human to human. And that means I'm able to create space to hear and really listen to other people's stories and be able, from that perspective, to shine light on what they might be seeing and what they might not be seeing. And that's what I love about storytelling, because sometimes when we keep things in our own minds, we go round and round in circles without seeing the bigger picture. And when you have someone else to speak to and who can relay back, not because they want to teach you anything, because I do believe, again, that we all have answers to everything that we do from that deep knowing, but to just show you what you are saying and then ask, is this what you mean? So that people can also become even more clear in their own minds about how they are living their life. There is one question that I love from this author. His name is Cory Muscara in his book. And one of the first chapters, he asked the question, and I'm paraphrasing on this. He says, if I'm to ask you how are you today, I can say to you, Elena, what does it feel to be you right now?
I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
So
That's a
I
tough
can't say,
question,
oh
though.
no.
Like if you were to put me on the spot trying to answer right now, I'd be like, it would take me some time to think about like,
Yeah.
what does it feel to be me right now?
And that's the point. And that's the point.
What's the author
It
name again?
allows you, Cory Muscara.
Cory Muscara. Okay.
Yeah. And it speaks about taking a pause and sinking into your body and just saying, oh, okay, what does it feel to be me right now? And what you're doing with that is you're honoring yourself. It's another form of self love, it's another form of self compassion. It's another form or way of allowing yourself to be vulnerable to your own self, to be vulnerable to the people who you feel safe with. It's also honors you being truly heard and seen and understood, because it's not a conversation where I can then come and say, oh no, Elena, you can't be feeling that way. That's not right. I have no way of knowing that. I'm not living your life, right? In fact, if I say that, I'm judging you. So if I do say that, I'm not providing that psychologically or emotionally safe space where you can be vulnerable. Because as soon as someone says that, then we, in our body language, become small and we think we're not relative. But if you're in a safe space, you open up, and whether to yourself or to other people, and it allows you actually to bloom and flourish because you're seeing yourself and other people are seeing you for who you really are, not who we have become because of the surroundings we've grown up in or because of what we need to be in our professions or our business. And that all led me to do a PhD in conscious business ethics because the first couple of years when I was working, a lot of the environments I worked in felt very unsafe. And examples are there was a lot of hierarchy, so top-down leadership, fear-based leadership, where literally leaders would say, for example, I am the only one who can say yes or nay on this. Regardless of the fact that maybe the decisions or the actions you're taking are to the benefit of the reason why we're here. And it's because they want to be seen by their authorities that they know everything. Now, I know that not everyone knows everything. And what I know is that when you hire correctly, you're hiring someone for their skill set to contribute to hopefully a clear strategy that you're hiring them for. So if you're hiring a high performer, the important thing is being clear on why they're here, then giving them the room and the space to bring their knowledge and the skill set within the resources that are currently available, obviously, in the company, towards the goal that you all want to achieve. So a lot of the organizations that I worked with were not clear on their goals, and their goals were very short-lived. And it was almost like we were trying to fight fires. And in fighting fires all the time, we lost as an organization as a whole the reason why we were all there. And it's also because most of the organizations I was in were in an economy that was not okay. So there were times when we literally were always having to fight fires. But unfortunately, the leaders were not visionary enough to make sure that they were paying attention to the vision and the reason why we're here. And so we lost the plot. And so there was a lot of corridor gossip. There was a lot of trying to be seen and heard in an really psychologically unsafe environment. So infighting, there were a lot of silos between departments. There were a lot of just people coming to work to tick the box so they could go home because the environment was really stressful and anxiety producing. And what that did from my already unhealed space was it just continued that cycle of stress and anxiety, and the other shoe is going to fall down, and oh my goodness, what's going on in my life? And so by the time I got home in the evenings, I was exhausted. Weekends, I was exhausted. My nervous system was just tired. And then I had to do that again, over and over, every single week. And there was no support. There were no well-being programs. And even if they was just on paper. They were not in reality. They were not embedded in the actual work that we're doing. And so I really wanted to understand, out of my own curiosity, to say, surely in all the years before I was even born, the way that business was run and the way that leadership was run, there must have been a better way of doing this. How have other people done it? How are other people really happy to go to work every single Monday? And so I got curious from a very young age to understand these types of work environments and saw how detrimental and damaging they were to the individuals that were coming to work. These very people who would go home and have families that they needed to look after. You're stressed, you're exhausted, you've got a lot of anxiety, you go home. Obviously, there are going to be problems in your marriage. Obviously, there are going to be problems in your relationship. Obviously, there are going to be gaps because you don't have the energy to look after other people, let alone your own self.
Right.
And so because we spend so much time, especially if you're in an 8 to 5 job, so much time in that space, it's really important that our workplaces are psychologically safe. Because here's the thing, this is also beneficial to your bottom line. Because when your people are feeling really safe, they're feeling understood, seen, and heard, you nurture and appreciate the skill set you hired them for, they are able to actually increase their performance. Because when someone is always stressed and anxious, what's happening is they're again releasing cortisol in their brain. So all their energy, because the brain already takes huge amounts of energy compared to the rest of our body systems. And I think the brain takes about, if I'm not mistaken, about 20% of the energy of your whole entire body. So
Yeah.
if all your energy is already going to anxiety and stress, there's not enough room to actually focus on being creative and innovative and to
Yes.
perform at higher levels. But when you are not stressed, or there are only reduced instances of stress, because we do need stress spaces in our life so we can
Yeah.
grow, but if that's the continual story in your life,
Mm.
cortisol actually starts damaging your whole body system. And so you start getting ill, which means that you're probably taking more days off, which is impacting your performance and your output, which in the long run, if you're on the face of customers and the services that you're producing, the quality is going to go down,
Mm.
which means your return on investment is also going to go down.
Mm.
So looking after the people that we lead in the workplace, in our communities, in the homes, in our nations. And when I say people, it's including yourself. So it's the people you lead, the people you serve, the people you look after, including yourself. That increases performance in the workplace, in the community, in your home, wherever you serve. And that increases your return on investment in
Mm.
whichever way you find that, whether
Mm.
it's in monetary terms, whether it's in products that you produce, whether it's in the type of service that you offer to people, everything is affected. Even as a student, right? You're able to retain more of the things that you're learning if you're not so stressed, because you're using all parts of your brain. You're able to retain all of the things, or most of the things that you're learning. And the journey becomes so much easier when
Mm.
you are harnessing and controlling the hormones that are being spewed out in your brain, by making sure that the thoughts, the environments that you're in are also nurturing.
Mm.
So everything is linked to each other. And that's what my degree in conscious business ethics was about. How can we become conscious leadership,
Mm.
conscious leaders, which is really about how can we become more self-aware of what's happening within our own lives, each part of our lives. And because the more self-aware we are, the higher our emotional intelligence becomes. So
Yeah.
you don't go and get emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is the result of self-awareness. Self-awareness itself is the result of self-inquiry. Self-inquiry just means questioning everything. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I here? Is it working? Is it not working? What does it feel to be me right now? What can I change? What would I love? Where can I seek help? What resources do I have? How would I like the rest of my life to look like in all aspects of my personal journey, my professional journey, my business journey?
Mm. Can I pause you
So, and I
here for
know,
just a second?
yeah.
I think that because you said so many really interesting things, and as you're speaking, I think those questions, first of all, super powerful, and I think that's an issue to begin with because we don't ask those questions, especially as leaders. And as you're speaking, I'm just thinking of how much interaction I have in the corporate world and with different companies, and people work in those companies and so on, and I feel like there is I started to look like as I started doing my own kind of research around these topics. I remember I started to realize I was like all of these leaders that are projecting these egos and this just lack of awareness, lack of emotional intelligence. I was like, oh, they're just like kids who never healed. They're kids and that it doesn't have to be extreme trauma. It's just like they are just kids that never worked on that part of them to be like truly a conscious leader and be like almost like more humane to like others. It's very, and then I think that's part of it. I think there are a lot of people in corporate world today that are just you know not asking themselves those questions, not are just on this autopilot, and it's like became the norm to be just miserable, right? And then that misery, it's like, well, the only thing I can control is at work, so let me be a control person at work and let me control what I can control. But really, it's like you probably just need to work on other things in your life, and maybe you'll because I think people project a lot of their personal issues at work, especially in a leadership position, right? And I think the other piece of it is also the system, the way that the corporates are run today, and the way, especially when you're at the leadership role, like it's all about money. Like if you're not making money, like, and I've actually, I still remember this was like maybe 5, 6 years ago. I remember I was having a similar conversation with a leader. This one when I was in Dubai. And we're talking about like empathetic leadership. And he said, well, anybody who thinks that you need to be X, Y, and Z probably doesn't understand business. So basically what he was saying is like, oh, well, if you have to care about your people, you don't understand business. And I'm like, and it stuck to me because I was like, wow, because he was just very comfortable and honest with me. And I was like, wow, that's how he thinks. And I was like, I bet you so many people think that way. And at the end of the day, like companies, especially in the US, like everybody's trying to come up with all these well-being initiatives and all these like, all these perks for employees. But honestly, Barbara, at the end of the day, I'm convinced, like, let's say I'll be kind. 60-70% of corporations do not care. They don't care if you're burnt out. They don't care about you're happy, not happy at work. They just want you to do the job. They want you to they want to pay you for what they cut. They don't care if you can be more productive. They just want you to do what you're there to do. But I completely agree. I think, and honestly, I think some of those organizations are not where they could be because they're losing on creativity and all those other things. And anyway, it's and it's so spot on what you're speaking on, because I see this all the time in my work and talent development. Like I don't know. It's just what's mind blowing to me is like, I don't understand how companies don't see that. Like, am I just naive to think that, like, don't you as a leader see how much money, like what you were saying, how much money goes to healthcare claims through your company? I mean, which is a whole other conversation, but don't you see how people are just like barely doing the minimum when they could be thriving and doing so much more for your companies? So it's pretty, I don't even know, sad as the right word. It's just like, I don't know, annoying to me at this point that we just don't see this. And like everybody's just so worried about like the bottom line, but then it's like, well, your bottom line could be really improved if you just do some really basic things, like treat people like human beings. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
No,
went
you're
on a
very
rant.
right. No, I love that. I love that. And I love that you brought it up because what we are seeing in the corporate world, or at least from when I was in the corporate world, was a lot of fear-based leadership. Fear in that we are, as you said, have traumas in the past. Now, when we speak about trauma, it's not necessarily what people did to you, it's also what people did not do to you. And what I mean by that is it can be in the form of neglect.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Yeah.
be a child, everything is fine, right? Bills are paid, food on the table, roof on your head, over your head. Um, but you're not receiving the love that you need as a child. There's been some sort of neglect. And so when we look at trauma, I know the narrative a lot is about what happened. At least for me, most of it was mostly stuff that happened to me. And over time, it was stuff that did not happen that I needed as a child, the tactile love that I really needed from a deep, loving, motherly perspective with no harm. And that was a form of neglect. So that's another form of, it's something that was missing in my life that I also needed. So when we look at trauma, it's important to look at it from both sides, because some people are like, well, I lived in an okay household. And so the conversation is really about digging into that and saying, okay, let's really look at it, because the behavior that we're seeing in your life as an adult is you're treating other human beings in a way that's not okay. What happened? What got you to that stage? And it's not a space of pointing fingers or saying you're a bad person or a bad leader, but it's just saying the way you're behaving right now is not okay. And let's unpack that, because surely you don't want to live your life that way. Do you? Maybe you do. But if you don't, and I know 100% people don't want to live that way, because inside that deeper knowing voice is always there. Sometimes it's very low, especially the older we get, because we're just living our lives on a vicious cycle of what we were raised on. And so if we don't take the journey of healing as leaders, we are losing out on that bottom line. We are losing out on creating these long-term relationships with the people that we serve and lead for us to be able to come together as a community to produce even more and to have better quality services. And it's also not great on your body and your system as a leader, because again, it goes back to your brain and the hormones and chemicals that you're releasing. Now, if I'm to take those leaders' side for a second, it's also very fearful for them to then sit back and say, okay, I have to ask these questions. Because it's almost like you have to die to the person that you are right now, the person you've identified yourself to be, to now really dig down and say, oh, maybe there's another part of me that I don't know. What will that do to my identity? What will that do to my reputation? That's scary. That's really hard.
But how do you I completely agree. I think most people are just afraid to face that. I mean, I've definitely had my own share of like awarenesses. I was like, oh my God, how did like, like how, like like certain things that I've done and certain decisions that I made in my life. I'm like, you have to face yourself and you have to be like, oh, like that was a choice I made and so on. So I think, and you become better from that. But I think a lot of people are struggle with that. So how do you overcome that fear of looking yourself in the mirror and asking yourself that, like, how do you encourage people who are listening to be like, I know I need to do this, but Barbara, I don't know. I'm not ready because my whole life can fall apart. And I think that's the fear factor, right? It's like, because sometimes like depending on what it is and whatever it may be, but it can be so life altering that you have to completely change your life. And I think the what do I do now that I'm aware is even scarier. Like awareness is scary, but then it's like, oh, now that I'm aware, now I can't unthink this. I can't unsee this. And now I have to make a change. And that change is scarier than actually realizing what I need to change. And then like where do people start? I guess like what's a, I don't know, a softer way to do this to yourself.
Yes. No, there's definitely a softer landing, but it becomes hard and soft as you go along. So yes, and I'll answer your question just now. So there is that fear factor to say, this is a lot. I don't know if I want to do that because I've identified myself with this. Now I have to go look at this. No, thank you very much. So that's the one fear. The second fear is I don't have time. I package it in fear because if we look at our lives, the things that serve us, we do take the time for those things. Whether it's serving us in a good way or a bad way, if we feel it's something we really want to do, we do that. So saying to ourselves, I don't have the time, for me is a fear thing. And I actually have something at the moment that I am also afraid of at the moment. I've just registered a business here and I haven't looked at all the documentation because I'm like, it's a new space, it's in a new language, but I know I'm going to do it. And so what is helping me with this, and this is what people can take from this, is I developed what is called the Mutedzi 3D protocol. And I'm sharing this because it's a softer landing. It's what helped me and will help me for the next chapter of my life. So Mutedzi obviously is my last name. And what I've done, and the reason why I put my last name is I've taken all the qualifications, all the knowledge from that of how our brains work, the neuroscience part, and understanding that if I put myself in a calm space and I'm doing the things that bring me joy, and maybe I need to dance for 5 minutes before I open those documents so I can release good feel hormones, then I'll be okay. Then I'm not sort of spiraling into my fear zone too much. Then at least my body will support me from that perspective. I'm taking the psyche part, the psychology, all the information from psychology and how my habits become my personalities. And I don't want to take the personality I had before the stage I'm in now because it does not serve me anymore. So who can I reach out to? Now I speak about the anthropology because anthropology is people and culture and society. Who in my circle of friends who can hold space for me and make me feel okay and remind me that I'm okay, whether things work out or not, it doesn't matter. Everything that's external is not who I am necessarily. But if I want it to be who I am, if it feels right, what can I do in my space? Who can hold space for me? Who else is in business where I can ask questions related to what I'm doing at the moment? So it's really about surrounding yourself with the people who are either on that journey or who have been on that journey, and asking them questions, sharing with them what you're afraid of so they can hold space for you. It's about being kind and gentle to yourself, because if you're pointing fingers at yourself, if you're saying, stop that nonsense, there's no way that you're going to lead with empathy. That's not how we make a profit. You are actually telling yourself that what you're thinking is not okay, so there's something wrong with you. So you're blaming yourself and you're making yourself feel really bad by saying those bad things inside of your head. So you're not being compassionate with yourself. So start by what you're saying. This feels really scary. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do this. But the fact that it's in my mind, there must be something about that. So let me just be curious for now. I don't have to act on it. I just want to be curious. I'm just going to ask questions about it and see where that leads me. If it leads me nowhere, that's okay. If it leads me somewhere, that's great. And so it's cushioning yourself. That's what I call it. So it's understanding human behavior. It's understanding that the brain is in your head. It's understanding that from a cultural perspective, you can reach out to different people. It's understanding that there are actual statistics that say that if I am a better leader, if I'm a conscious leader, one who transforms my own life from the inside out, I am actually, without effort, able to create psychologically safe environments for other people. So creating psychological safe places becomes the result of me working on myself, because I change, right? And so the way that I communicate with other people also changes. It's not about being nice to other people, it's about being kind. And let me separate those two things. And this answers the question for leaders who say, well, if I'm nice to people or kind to them, or, I'm lovey-dovey to them, then we're not going to get anything done. But here's the thing. You as a leader, you need to be clear on what the strategy is of the business. And the best way to do that is to make your strategy actionable. When you make your strategy actionable, what that means is 5 things. Focus on 5 things. The purpose. Why are we here as a business, as a department, as a team? Why are we here? Make sure that's clear in 1 sentence. Your vision. And turn the word vision into long-term goals. Knowing that this is the reason why we are here, what do we want to achieve in 10 years' time? Where do we want to be as a team, as a department, as an organization? That's number 2, your vision, long-term goals. Number 3, mission, short-term goals. Now that we know why we are here, our purpose, we know what we want to achieve in the next 10 years, our vision. Let's break that down into yearly, quarterly, monthly, or weekly activities that we need. These are the weekly, monthly, yearly activities we need to do to be able to achieve the things that we need to achieve in 10 years' time. So those are your mission activities, number 3. Number 4 is your values. There's a lot of talk in businesses and organizations around culture. Values are building blocks of culture. We build a culture by saying we are, for example, let's say a value is efficient. We are an efficient organization. Our culture is built on the value of efficiency. To be efficient as you in your role, what are the things that you can do? So efficiency is not a word or a value that you memorize, but it's how you carry out the task that you're having to do. That's how you embody the values. That's how you build a culture. So that 4th thing is important. Number 5 is now taking everything in perspective. We now know what the activities are that we need to do on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis to achieve our purpose and our vision. And we know how we want to do that, our values. So you take each of the activities, next to them, you align the resources that you need to be able to achieve those values. Now, sometimes we don't have those resources, whether it's money, whether it's people, whatever it is, then ask yourself, what are the resources I currently have now that I can use to achieve this activity? So then you align that. And because you already have demarcated that I need to do this activity by this time, you already have a timeline. So you've got a timeline, the activity, the resources. And resources include human resources, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know the type of people you need to retain, to hire, and to move on onto another project or another organization if that does not serve the strategy. So making your strategy actionable by clarifying those 5 things allows you to have a foundation and also space to communicate with the people that you're leading to say, we hired you for this. Here is the clear strategy. The strategy is transferable and translatable to each department, each team, individual in the organization. So everyone is clear why we're here. And obviously, yes, things change. So you can also pivot because now you can say, oh, we don't have these resources anymore. What can we bring in? Because everything is clear on paper, which means if big world challenges like COVID happens, because you know where you are and what resources you now have or resources you don't have anymore, you're able to pivot very quickly because everything is clear. There's so much greatness in clarity. And that clarity opens space for you to be able to communicate better with the people that you're leading and for them to step in and say, hey, we've run out of these resources. This is another way we can work on this because they've also got the information and the knowledge that hopefully, if you hire it correctly, they can bring in and you'll be able to see where things are not working, where things are not working, and continue that cycle of communication. So you are kind because you are clear.
Yeah, I like that.
If you're not clear, of course you're going to be afraid because you're
Yeah.
fighting fires all the time. Of course you're going to be
Yeah.
afraid. That's a
Yeah.
natural thing in life. And just to speak, you spoke about just one last point on this. You
Yeah.
spoke about the ego and how people have big egos. And the ego has been beaten down for years. And I myself have told my ego just not really great things. And I think there's also some more understanding and new knowledge that's coming around or has been around for a long time around the ego that has not made it into our everyday narrative. So the ego is really about the masks that we've put on to protect ourselves from what happened in the past. So if I was sexually abused as a child, of course, the relationships that I have after that are not going to be okay because there's a part of me that's shut down. It was like, well, I don't want anyone to abuse me anymore. Obviously, I'm doing this obviously in a subconscious level. I'm not saying it outright, but there's a part of me that shuts down that's protective of me because as a child, I couldn't protect myself. And until I take the journey of self-awareness, of inquiring, of questioning to say, my relationships has not been great. And I loved him in the beginning, but something happened. I did something, or just something did not work out. Okay, what's going on? If I don't ask that, I will continue attracting the same work environments, the same romantic relationships, the same friendships that are just repeating the same cycles that I had when I was a child. If I want to get away from that, the question is respecting our ego, first of all, and thanking it and just saying, thank you so much for stepping up in whichever way you energetically stepped up to help me without even realizing. My nervous system shut down, or that part of my nervous system shut down as a way to protect myself, because our bodies are built to protect ourselves first and foremost. And our bodies are still in the hunter-gatherer phase of making sure that we are okay and protected, but that our environment is moving at a hyper speed, so much more than our bodies can catch up. And so our egos were there to protect us. And when you get to a stage of healing, it's recognizing and appreciating our ego for the role that it's played, and then lovingly releasing it and just saying, thank you so much. This is the journey that we want to go to. What can we do? What information do we need? What support do I need? How can I be more compassionate with myself? How can I be more compassionate with other people? Even to go to the stage of asking other people, how does it feel for me being your friend? How does it feel for me being your leader? What can I change? What can I adjust? Because we're all here for the same goal. We're in this relationship because of this. We're in this workspace because of this. So clarity is important. Clarity also allows you to heal. So that's the Mutedzi protocol. The 3Ds, very quickly. Once you understand that, define, design, display. define what you really want out of your life. Really be honest and transparent with yourself. And then from that, create roadmap strategies that help you get there. Start adopting each day, each hour even, the habits and behaviors that will lead you to where you want to go or sustain the vision and the goals that you want. Because again, you start recreating the neural pathways in your mind and your brain the more you do something over and over again. And there's lots of statistics around this that I can share later. But it's just that I think in all of that, the important thing is self-awareness as a result of you inquiring about everything in your life, emotional intelligence that results from that self-awareness, which allows you to become more flexible and agile as a human being, which allows you to create conducive, psychologically and emotionally safe spaces for your own self and for the people around you. And in the end, that allows us to flourish, be more creative, be more innovative, produce more, produce better quality products and services, and overall have a better well-being because we're taking care of our own nervous system, our own bodies, and that also emits good energy around us. Because all of us and everything in the world is energy. We just see it as physical, tangible things, but it's energy. So whatever we send out is also what we're attracting. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So many gems. If people want to kind of continue a conversation, maybe get in touch with you or follow some of your work, where can they get in touch with you?
I am available on LinkedIn. So just look up my name, Barbara Mutedzi. I'm on LinkedIn almost every day. I'm also on my website, which is called designyourlifefoundation.com. And that came about around just you can design your life when you really understand your psyche, the society around you, how your mind and brain works. And then just taking those elements and creating the life that you're here to live, following that inner voice. So it's really leading and living from the inside out. So very easy to remember, designyourlifefoundation.com.
Last question I ask all of my guests. What is one question you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Oh, that's a good one. Who am I?
Brilliant.
Just who am I? And see where that leads you.
I love that. Barbara, lots of really great gems in this conversation. I thank you. I feel like we can spend hours together. So maybe we will. Next time I'm in Bali, that's exactly what we're going to do. I think it's going to be beautiful. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.